Welcome to the Let Me Be Free podcast. My name is Jackie.
And my name is Alwynn.
We're two sisters from Ireland living in Australia, navigating our healing journeys together, and this is our podcast, Let Me Be Free. We'll be interviewing everyone who's helped us to get us where we are today, whether that's therapists, loved ones, people from our Facebook group, Let Me Be Free the Wounded Inner Child, or people who we've never met but have had huge impacts on our lives. Follow along with us on this journey as we try to dissect what has really worked for us in the hopes that you too might be freed. Hi guys, before we jump into today's episode, just a friendly reminder that there are timestamps for this episode in the description, so you can check if the topics we discuss today are comfortable for you to listen to.
So welcome back to the Let Me Be Free podcast. Today I'm going to have another one of our group members, Roisin, and this is kind of a slightly different interview in that I know Roisin very well at this point. I don't know actually when she joined the group. She can let us know exactly when that was. But since Roisin joined the group, we hit it off. Like I think she was just so honest and open, and she contacted me. We ended up doing some work together. But she's been just a gift. I've absolutely loved working with her. I actually count her now as one of my friends, which is such a beautiful thing. And I'm really hoping that she'll be a bit more of a feature on our podcast because she's a bit like a sidekick to me. So I really wanted to use this opportunity to really chat to Roisin, get a bit of a background about her, because I really hope that you'll hear a bit more from her throughout the podcast. And really just get a bit more into the reasons why Roisin started healing. And I'm really looking forward to that myself, because we talk about healing in the present, but we generally have not talked about why she kind of started healing and the purpose for it. So I'll introduce you, Roisin, and then I'll read the post, your first post that you ever posted on our group, and then we'll go from there. So welcome, Roisin.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
So when did you start with us, or when did you join the group?
I think it was around January of last year, so roughly just a year ago.
Wow.
This time last year, I came across, I still wonder how I actually found you to this day, because I never followed Janet Lansbury. It was the most surreal thing. I was literally scrolling on my phone one day, and your interview with Janet Lansbury came up, and I read it, or I listened to it. I can't remember which it was now. And it threw me into turmoil. I can remember honestly, just feeling on the one hand that I could relate to this more than anything that I'd ever read, but also that I rejected it so strongly as well, because at that time, looking back, at that time I was completely in denial. But it touched something obviously that was there, that was waiting to be, I suppose, for me to look at. So yeah, and I then joined your group because I think there was a link at the bottom to join your group. So I went on your group, was horrified.
Which is kind of similar to what the post says, essentially. So in that moment of horrified, I'll actually read the post just so that we can get a bit of a real first-hand knowledge of what it is you were actually experiencing in that moment.
Yeah.
So what you said was, "Hey everyone, so I'm new to this group and new to the concept of inner child healing, etc. At the moment, I feel a bit overwhelmed, and if I'm honest, depressed at the prospect of the next few weeks, months, years of my life. I respect everyone on here so much, I can't tell you. But when I read posts about how dark it is for you, how much pain you are in, how long, difficult, and slow this healing process seems to be, it frankly makes me feel scared, hopeless, and reluctant to even begin. And please don't take that the wrong way or as a critical comment at all. I totally get why people need to share and be heard and how healthy that is. But I suppose I'm just looking for some reassurance that I will cope with all this, some hope that I will survive it. I've recently become a single parent, and that in itself frightens me, and I'm scared it will all become too much. I have 4 children, 3 at home, and they need me to be strong, especially now. I've started inner child meditations and found them both heartbreaking but also very, very positive. almost as if this is what I have been needing so badly. But then I read some books and hear about the long months and years of grief and pain ahead, or read about how people are hurting so much and think, I can't do it. I suppose in some ways I'm scared I'll go back to my old coping mechanisms. And so I decided to share this post for accountability as much as anything, which was an incredibly brave post.
Yeah, and you know what? I relate to that now because I still have so many moments, like, where I really feel all of that, even to this day, even despite all the work that I've done and working with you, it's something that, I'm 46 now. So, I would say for 45 years, I have, existed in a certain way. And it's huge to change those habits and thought patterns and behaviors, and to actually look at yourself, look at that part of you that's suffering. I buried that so deep for so long.
And I think that's one of the really fascinating things I was thinking about before our interview today. I was thinking about you, and I was thinking, how the fuck did she decide to do this? Like, I know lots of people who have been in marriage breakups, who have had massive catalysts for change and really deep traumatic experiences, which a divorce with 4 kids is very traumatic, And I think none of them decided to do the inner work. Like, none of them decided to open Pandora's box of pain and suffering and dive into it. And so I was like, what made her do it? Like, what yeah, you found that podcast, which I'm absolutely shocked at. Like, how on earth you found that podcast in the first place was divine intervention. But then why didn't you run? Why didn't you just hightail it out of there?
I feel like I did for a while. I mean, honestly, looking back now, I didn't make a conscious decision to start this process. I didn't even make a conscious decision to leave my marriage, if I'm honest with you. I honestly feel as if it happened to me, because that part of me that was just in so much pain kind of took over in a way. Because even when when I joined the group initially, and sort of before that, I had been reading so much into this idea of healing your inner child, but it was all, like I've said this to you before, it was all that kind of glamorous, glossy, like, essentially, I'll be honest, what I believed was, look, I've left my marriage, I'm on my own here with, finances falling down around my ears, not really knowing what the future holds, really terrified. And I bought into this idea that I could heal myself in about, I had set aside like a month, that I was really going to do this work. And there was people that I was following on Facebook and things like that who, that's how they sold it. And I've told you before, like, I paid heart healing, 4-part heart healing programs, that you're going to look at your inner child, and you were going to do that for a short term, very finite period of time, and then you were going to be healed. And I believed that. So that was my mindset at the time, was like, right. So then I found your group around the same time, and it was very clear to me that that was not what you were, you were kind of putting forward as the path. It was very much, this is a lifelong process. You really do have to look at this. You can't run away from it. It is going to be painful. And I didn't at that point. I rejected it. Like, I thought, no, absolutely not. I loved everything that you wrote on that group. Everything that you wrote resonated with me on such a deep level, but yet still I was like, no. And I didn't really engage, I don't think, for probably like the first 6 months. It triggered me a lot, because I was thinking everything you wrote, I was like, this girl is writing about me. How does she know how I feel? Like, how does she understand? But on the same, that then my ego or whatever was saying, no, you're not like that, Roisin. No, you haven't been through what Alwynn's been through. You haven't been through what these other people have been through. Almost like you're a fake, was how I felt. And honestly, I have to say, it's only through me finally accepting through reading and reading and reading your posts that I have only really in the last few sort of weeks realized, you know, yeah, I have a lot of trauma, because I had buried that. I'd buried that my whole entire life. I'd never kind of been prepared to look at it. I couldn't relate my childhood to what went on in my marriage. I couldn't marry up the two concepts, that, you know, the fact that I was willing to live such a miserable existence, which I had been for my whole entire adult life, if I'm honest. Obviously, there were loads of good things. You know, I've got 4 kids, and I've got, you know, there's lots of positive things, but I always disassociated hugely from everything around me. And I always felt that. So, but I was never able to make the link with my childhood at all. I knew on a, you know, kind of conscious level that, yeah, my childhood was terrible. I knew that, you know, I knew that there was abuse and, you know, really kind of extreme emotional neglect, and, you know, I had always felt terrible, is the only way I can describe it. I'd always felt terrible my whole life. But my narrative, that, you know, all my friends, my husband, everybody around me was, you know, you're really, really strong. You're the only one in your family that's normal. You know, my family have a history of extreme, you know, mental illness. My mom has chronic depression, and, you know, she was barely present really our whole childhood. And my dad was very, very ill. He had, you know, manic depression, and he committed suicide, and there was lots of things that happened. So, but in my head, my whole life, and, you know, as I say, that was my kind of storyline, was, you know, it's amazing that I just came out of this so perfect and so normal, and look at me, I've got this brilliant job, I've got a husband, I've got kids, I'm a good mom. In my mind, I was a good mom. And, you know, I don't inflict on my kids what was inflicted on me. And that was my way of, I suppose, keeping a lid on it all. Was like, you know, I don't repeat these patterns. You know, I'm healed, and I'm going to show everybody, you know. So, but inside I was just dying, to be honest with you. And the problems in my marriage, I didn't know where to begin to, you know, to assert myself and to assert my needs. I didn't know what my needs were. I didn't know how to just survive. And I think essentially what happened was it all just crashed down around me. And I I don't know. I just feel as if I didn't have a choice. I had to leave my marriage, or I was going to die. Like, part of me had already just died. And, you know, it wasn't a brave decision. It wasn't like a powerful moment. It was literally like, I didn't want to leave my marriage, but I just, something took over. I can't even describe it. And it was the same with, you know, you. I always was like, I don't want to join this woman's group. I don't want to go through that. I'd like, what? Like, this sounds horrific. Like, no, Jesus. And I was genuinely like so triggered. I was actually offended. I was actually annoyed with you. Like, I wanted the 4-week program. Like,
Yeah. What is she doing? She's talking bullshit.
Yeah, fuming. I was fuming. But yet at the same time, it was a slow burner where eventually I came to, I suppose, grow up a little bit, if I'm honest, and realize that life doesn't work like that, you know. And it's not that scary. And that's one of the things that you've taught me, not to be afraid, because I was so afraid to go there. It scared me. It still scares me, and it just breaks my heart to go there. So having you to show me that it's okay, you know, you will survive it. That's really, I think, what I needed ultimately, because I just was such a small, weak person that I had this front, and that's how I coped. But yet it was more painful than anything I've done with you. What I was doing before was more painful.
That's a scary thing, isn't it? I think that this is one of the most scary things, is that we're so afraid. I have this real, I don't know what I would call it, but I don't know if I heard it somewhere, but it was the discomfort of staying the same has to be more uncomfortable than the discomfort of change, because so many times it's actually the familiarity of the chaos, the familiarity of that It's that we get so used to feeling miserable that we just think that that's our normal. That's okay. You know, it's normal to hate your job every day. It's normal to, you know, scream at your kids or hate your partner or be in a loveless marriage and just hang out for the drink at the weekend, or hang out for the chocolate, or hang out for whatever it is in the future that is going to make you happy. And I think that this is kind of the choice point, or maybe not even a choice point really, but it is kind of, I feel like for so many of us, it's the discomfort of staying in the familiarity of the pain and the suffering has to become more uncomfortable than the discomfort of being like, fuck it, fine, I'll look at this stuff, I'll deal with it. But not everyone does choose that. We can bury your head more. You could have chosen an addiction. You could have chosen a deeper addiction in order to stay in that marriage. And many people do. Many people do choose, rather than the discomfort of, even though they're so uncomfortable in the misery and they're not really fully aware of the misery, they just think that that's normal. Well, then many people will just find another way to cope with the misery, add something to it, add an affair, add, you know, something else to take away some of that pain. And so, you know, I recognize this so often in my life and in my healing, where I get to those choice points where it's like, you know, fuck, which is more painful? This experience right now that I'm feeling, or this possibility of it being easier? But it's still, it's the unknown. It's the unknown is so terrifying, even when we're in that state of just misery and sadness and pain, which, you know, as I say, I believe suffering, you know, people always talk about suffering. And I'm like, you know, we've got suffering all wrong. People are like, oh, suffering is like when you don't have any food and when, you know, whatever really deep traumatic things are happening. But I believe suffering is any life where you are not able to experience joy, peace, contentment, harmony, you know, anger, sadness, grief, all alongside, but where you're free from the fear of everyday life, fear of anxiety, misery. But so really in that way, I believe all of us are suffering. Everyone is suffering. And I believe that, say, the choice that you made was to say, okay, I know that this is fucking horrible and I'm terrified of where I'm going to go, but I'm going to choose to try and do something about it, which it really was such a brave decision. I know you're saying that it wasn't really a decision, but as I said, you could have chosen to hide deeper, go deeper into your pain by just covering it with something more shiny, you know, or more sinister, you know, cocaine, anything. There's many ways to bury your pain. But yeah, like, you know, you chose that. You chose to, and I feel like once you chose that, you know, what I've really recognized and noticed with you, and which is why I love you so much, is I always love your honesty. You have been from the get-go, you've always been so honest with me. Like if you think, if I would say something to you and I'd be like, you know, Roisin, like this is X, Y, or Z, and you're like, yeah, Alwyn, something in my mind's telling me that that's fucking bullshit. Like that doesn't work for me. That's not going to work for me. And I'm like, yes, I love it. Tell me what's in your mind. Tell me everything. But I always just commended, and I always respect so deeply the people who really do the work. And it's why I've been so open and insistent on always working with you, is because you always, to me, do the work. Even though you shame yourself for it and say that you don't, it's all bullshit. You really do the work. You're consistently showing up. You're consistently trying to heal yourself, really. You've always been doing that from the get-go, which is, I believe, why we were connected and why, you know, you were brought to the group, because you were open to that, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I do shame myself. Even you saying that to me now, I'm like sitting here thinking, no, I really, really don't. But one of the things that you've taught me, that again, there's so many things that I wasn't aware of, you know, before I started working with you, was how much I shame myself. And, you know, actually, when you know, I wouldn't have said that I did, but when you tune into that part of you that, you know, I judge everything I do so much, and if I do something well, I find it really, really hard to give myself credit for it. Like that's definitely been one of the prevalent things with me is, I can never take any kind of credit for anything that I do. But if I don't do something, then all my focus goes onto that. So even just trying to shift that perspective a little bit, I'm not there yet with it, but it's like everything else. Since I started this journey, there's so many things, when you spend 45 years of your life, like so disconnected from your needs. I think that's the key one for me. I didn't know who I was. And that's how I was able to exist in, the marriage that I had. Don't get me wrong, there was lots and lots of, my husband is a good person, and I'll never say anything different. He is a good person. He has his own, like, really, really deep trauma from childhood as well, that he was never prepared to look at. But, but I, all along, I said, if he fixes himself, we will be happy. Like if he goes and gets counselling, he had gambling addiction. So my mindset for 20 years was, when he gets help, we're going to be happy. I did not know that I was broken as well. I didn't have any understanding or knowledge of the way that I kind of showed up in the relationship. And it was only whenever my mom was, she was in hospital with chronic depression for about 2 years there, going back to just before I actually found you. It was a few months before I found you. She was in hospital, and I've always had a very, very toxic relationship with my mom because her depression. I was always her carer. I was always her punch bag. So we've always had this really, really difficult relationship. And I had been liaising with her psychiatrist at the time. And I had quite bad, I was very sick with COVID and I hadn't been able to go up and visit her. And anyway, cut a long story short, the psychiatrist had said, look, will you come in for a chat just to talk about your mum's care? So I went in to meet with this girl, and in the course of the meeting, we were having a conversation about, my relationship with my mom essentially. And I was saying, when she starts treating me properly and when she fixes herself, me and her will be fine. It was the same narrative that I had with my marriage. And that was I believed that 1,000,000% that all these people around me were broken. And if only they would sort themselves out, we could just move on and we could be happy. And so anyway, in the course of the conversation, she had said to me, she had recommended that I go and do this thing called schema therapy. And she'd literally just thrown it in there, in a really, really nice way. And I, took a wee note of it and went away. And she'd sent me a couple of people that she thought that I could work with. Came away and started reading up on it. And I was absolutely horrified and offended. And this woman is actually saying that there's something wrong with me. Like, how dare she? Can she not see that it's my mom and that it's Paul? And so anyway, I went on ahead and I contacted the people, and but the more I read into it, and they were all booked up at the time because it was COVID and they had waiting lists and backlogs. So one of the girls had come back to me and said, yeah, I can take you on as a client, but it'll be like 3 to 6 months from now. And she'd sent me a reading list. And a lot of it was this book called Homecoming by John Bradshaw, which was all about inner child healing, and another book called The Emotionally Absent Mother. So I got the books anyway, started to read them. And that's when it floored me. It literally, I was reading about myself, and I had to accept at that point that, I was very, very affected, and that was the beginning, I suppose, of me unraveling this kind of, self-image that I had developed over the years, but it had also been given to me because I was always told, I was always my mum's carer. I was, she would have drummed into me, you don't have depression. You're lucky. You're the lucky one. You need to be there for me. You need to, look after me, care for me, be my punch bag, whatever. And I 1,000,000% bought that. And then it was very much, in our family, we were expected to, go to university. We're expected to, have a career. And, so on the surface, from the outside looking in, I had all this and I had achieved this despite everything. So it was literally, that was the beginning of this kind of, okay, now it's time for me to actually get to know me, take all of this bullshit essentially out of the equation, but that, you know, I knew in my heart that it wasn't true. So that was kind of the start of it. And I was still married at that point, and I was still with my husband. And I honestly think that it was a drip, 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 like slow process where, you know, I eventually I came to the point where I was like, see if I don't look at myself and start to at least try to get better. Like, you know, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be alive, because once you realize, you know, like you were saying, that, you know, you don't experience grief or anger, but you don't experience, you know, joy. You don't experience presence. I was never present with my kids. You know, I always felt this sense of extreme, like I don't belong anywhere. It's the only way I can describe it. I was frantically trying to manage Paul, micromanage him, instead of actually, you know, taking a step back and saying, what about me? Like, I actually matter. You know, I was really, really codependent, like chronically, I would say chronically codependent, you know, and yeah, it just kind of went from there. And I honestly feel like I was guided towards this group. But it did take me a long time to, you know, really accept that, you know, I am similar to all of these people on this group, because initially you know, it takes you a long time to kind of let those layers of you know, what the mask that you wear, or the armor that you wear to get you through the day, you know. And so yeah, it's been a really kind of, honestly, like, as painful as it's been, like, I've spent this last year, most days I just spend in tears, and you know, but I have to say this last year has been the best year that I've had, because it's the year that I've actually, but I've started to understand myself, and I know that I'm only at the beginning of that process, but it's just blown me away. Like, everything that I've learned, I've had so many moments where it's like, Jesus, I actually understand now why I show up the way I do in certain situations, you know, why I have so much shame, why I have so much guilt. And it's been from working, you know, one-to-one with you has been a godsend to me. I wouldn't have done it. Like, I just wouldn't have done the work on my own. I don't think anybody can, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't anyway.
Yeah, definitely. But like, you know, I think that, God, to be honest, there's just so much that you said there that, like, it makes me even emotional. Like, it really does, because I'm so proud of you, Roisin. Like, I really am. Like, you know, I've seen you from the start. Like, I remember how how much self-loathing you had, how much self-hatred, how much you bet yourself up. And it was just your normal. It was just the way of life. And, you know, obviously as time's gone on, because of your dedication to your own healing, to you showing up for yourself. Yeah, of course, you know, I have been there with you and I've been a guide for you. And yeah, it's amazing to have a guide, especially someone who believes in you is so important. But, you know, it's up to the person to do the work and show up and face themselves on such a deep level. And, you know, I really just think about how much strength and courage it took to the shift that magnifying glass of, you know, I'm looking out at everyone else who's fucking up my life, and turn that back in on ourselves. Because the reality is, Roisin, is you have every fucking reason to be angry at everyone around you that wasn't showing up, because, you know, in many ways, a lot of people did let you down. All of us, each of us are let down, you know, by our parents, by these people around us. And so, you know, we all have the right to be like, fuck you, it's your fault, you did this to me, this is your fucking problem. Like, fix yourself and adjust who you are around me. But it's just, the problem is that just doesn't heal us. It doesn't fix. Even if your mom had a miraculous recovery overnight and decided to be really loving to you and be an amazing mother, the root of all of that pain and loathing, and that belief system that you're nothing and that you're no one, that was ingrained in you. It didn't matter how much your mom would tell you that she loved you beyond that point. You would never have been able to ingest it. You would never have been able to take it in. The same way with Paul. If he had turned around and, been this incredibly, connected partner, your inner child would have been like, okay, what's happening? There's something not right here. This isn't safe. I don't feel safe because this isn't what I'm used to. And you would have found ways to sabotage it anyways. Everything has to start with the work that we do within ourselves, no matter who is around us, no matter what environment we're in. And so often I do find that people will say, oh, well, it's, my partner is the one that's fucked up, especially if one of our partners has an addiction. It's easier to be like, well, they're the problem, that they are the issue. And I don't, it's because of their childhood, it's because of them. But in so often, and I was talking to someone about this recently, I believe that, the partners that we attract, I believe that they have to be of the same vibration to us, which means that when I met my husband, Rob, I always think, why did we come together? We weren't very much, totally different backgrounds, everything. But now me and him very much recognize that the reason why we were so attracted to each other was both of us felt the same brokenness inside. Yet, if you were to look at us and talk to us, especially in later years as I started healing, I looked like this broken, wounded, feral, like falling to pieces person. And everyone looked to him as being this strong. He's always been that way, strong and, with no issues or no trauma and just happy. And only because he chose to do his own healing, which was because I essentially gave him an ultimatum. And I didn't do that from a place of wanting to change him necessarily. I did it from a place of, I'm doing my own work and I know what I deserve, and I deserve better than this. And you are not facing your own trauma. And if you can't face your own trauma, then we're not going to be able to stay together, because I'm not going to remain your punching bag, your emotional punching bag. And so similar, so many men are like, I don't have any trauma, I'm fine, I'm not going to get help. But it was because my husband, I know that I was his everything. And so it pushed him to the point where he was like, fuck, either I'm going to lose her or I have to face my shit, which is that for him, that tipping point of the discomfort of staying the same, became more uncomfortable than the discomfort of trying to change. He couldn't cope with the idea of losing me. And so that was enough of a push for him to, work himself and do his own healing. And it's as he does his own healing that we recognize we are just as broken as each other. We've always been as broken as each other. We've always been as hurt, as brokenhearted, as in pain as each other. And I believe that, no matter what we look like on the outside and no matter what we present as, whether one part of the equation seems completely fine and well functioning, I believe that at the root, all of us have something to heal, and we can only start by healing ourselves. And I know that if I told my husband that I needed him to change, he probably wouldn't have done it. But it was the fact that I said, no, I don't, like, I want better for you, yes, but it's what I'm not willing to take. I'm deserve better than this. Which took a lot for me to say, but it's from me doing my own inner work and finding my own worth and finding my own voice and recognizing that I'm sick of living in a life where I come last. And I really see that was you. You really have started to reconnect with those parts of you, and really like dive into all of that, into that healing.
I mean, definitely. I think in my experience and from what I've kind of went through the last year, when I started to get that knowledge and understanding of myself, and when I began to heal, I think I did quite a lot at the beginning. Like, I think, see, that initial couple of months was such a steep learning curve for me, and it fundamentally changed me. And it wasn't that I consciously decided that, I'm not willing to live like this. It actually was more that energetically, I rejected that existence. And, like, it wasn't premeditated. I didn't choose. I didn't plan to leave Paul. I didn't have, like it was so sudden and so, but, we had separated before because of the gambling bouts, and, things had been so awful between us, and that we had temporary separations. But, I was always going to go back, because I always believed that I needed Paul. I needed him so desperately, as much as he needed me. And, I couldn't exist without him, from so many different reasons, like logically, and those reasons are still there, like financially, practically. We built a whole life together over decades. So, it was absolutely terrifying for me to leave that. And it still is. I still have days now where it just tears me apart, that, because we weren't together for a year. Like, we were together for our whole lives, and, we've 4 kids together, and it just breaks my heart. But at the same time, I think what you're saying is spot on. Like, when you do this work, you can't go back. And I rejected that as well. Like, I was actually quite angry. I was like, I want to go back. So many days, I just want to go back. I just want, I look at other people around me, and, albeit I know that, people have opened up to me, like friends and things like that, since I've been, separated, and they're like, geez, you know what, you're brave. Sometimes I wish I could do that. And I know that, that everybody has their own problems at the end of the day. But, for me, I didn't want to make this choice. I didn't want to do it. But, more and more now, I'm grateful for the process. I'm so, so grateful. But ultimately, like, what you said at the start there, you need somebody who believes in you. You need somebody who can see what you can't see, because a lot of us didn't have that growing up. We were told, you're crap, essentially. That's the message I got, subtly and actually directly, on, so many occasions, that you do internalize that, no matter whether you have. I didn't know that I had internalized this message at all, but I did. And somebody else saying that to you, somebody who you trust, and when you first said that to me, I was like, no, she doesn't know me. See, if she knew me, she wouldn't be saying that to me. It's only really through building, the relationship, that I have been able to sort of slightly, slowly think, maybe my mum wasn't right. That, she would have told us very subtly, like, that, really, we're not much like this. We don't deserve anything. We don't deserve, to have, you should never feel good about yourself. Like, if I ever did well in exams, my mum would have said, well, are you sure that that's correct? Like, do you want to get that checked again? That, and just things like that, just all the time, just drip feeding that into you, not deliberately, but because that was how she felt about herself. So she couldn't help but, kind of, that was just how my mum, that's her mindset, still is to this day. Like, everybody else is better than us, and, that's how we kind of, that's the belief system that I had, and that's how we lived. So yeah, it's just such a roller coaster for me. It's such a roller coaster. Like, there's times whenever I feel I'm stuck here, like, everything I've done with Alwynn has been nothing. It's, I go through phases where I'm just like, I'm going backwards. But I now know, I understand that that's part of this as well. It's a journey, and it's not kind of linear at all, for me anyway.
It's not linear for any of us. I think that this is the sad part of it, and it's the hard part of it. But when you get acquainted with it, you, I guess, at least feel a bit more safe within it and more comfortable within it. I call it the tunnel. I think that there's, if you're going to go on a journey, you get in your car, if you don't know where you're going, if you don't put anything into the sat nav, if you're like, I just don't want to be fucking here, you know, that car will drive you off around in circles. You know, your subconscious will probably bring you to an ex's house who used to, you know, be abusive, or wherever your subconscious felt comfortable, you know, that's where you'll go. But when you get into your car and you say, I'm sick of being here, I'm sick of being here in this moment with this misery. I want to be there where there's happiness and there's joy, where I'm living a better life. And you stick that into the sat nav, you then are anchoring in, I am here, this is where I'm going. You drive that car, and like any journey, you're going to have times where the fucking wheel falls off and you have to stop and you're pissed off and it's hard and it's difficult. You're going to have times where you see the most beautiful sights, you know, the most incredible, clear moments where you're like, this is living. Why did I stay back there for so long?
Yeah.
And then you're going to have times where you're going through the tunnel. And when you go through that tunnel, you lose reception. You're in darkness. You can't hear anything on the radio. You can't hear anything on your phone. All you're left with yourself and the darkness and your thoughts and this long road through this dark tunnel. And I believe that we need these tunnels because it nearly tests us to see how much we can surrender, how much we can trust that eventually we'll come out the other side of the tunnel. And you know what? When you come out of a tunnel, doesn't it seem much more brighter? Doesn't the world seem so much more brighter? You come out of these tunnels and you can hear the music again. You can see the lights, you can see the sun, you can see the clouds, and you appreciate it so much more because you survived the tunnel. And when we're on this journey, it is a consistent, you know, a consistent roadmap of beautiful sights, of obstacles that get in your way, of tunnels where things are dark, but always followed by such brightness and beauty and light. And I believe more than you did the tunnel before. Every time we go through a tunnel, we nearly build up that resilience because we're like, shit, I got through that tunnel. Okay, I got through the last one, I can get through this one. But it's that when we are so unaware and this, we're not really fully, I guess, trusting, we don't feel safe on this journey, we don't have anyone else to kind of guide us on it, then when we get into a tunnel, we're like, I've gone backwards. I'm gone back into depression. I'm gone back into the hole. Nothing is better. Everything's worse. Because like any of us, when we're left with our own thoughts, you know, it can get really, really messy, or we can get to that point of, you know what, this is just a tunnel. I'm in a point where things are a bit darker and it's a bit more chaotic, and I know I'll get through it. And after it, I'm telling you, when I look ahead, that place that I'm going next is going to be even more beautiful, more bright than the last place I've been. But that's all about trusting and knowing that this is a journey. And you don't always know that. You don't have that awareness until you start it and you get those intuitive hits, you know, like that came to me when I was in my own tunnel and I was just meditating and I was journaling, and I had my guides or my inner voice or whatever. And it was just like, you're in a tunnel, Alwynn. It's okay. It's just a tunnel. And, you know, it's just dark, whatever, just trust. Soon you're going to be out and it's going to be light again. And that's, I think, what has been the greatest gift. And I think, honestly, for me working with you, I think my greatest gift was when you started telling me that you started hearing that inner voice, that inner wisdom within you, just giving you those little pockets. And I was like, oh, if I could have anything for everyone in the world, it would be to have that trust and that connection within your own self, that when you hear those little snippets of information, be it everything's going to be okay, or be it, you know, you're just struggling because you're feeling a bit abandoned or whatever it is. But it's when you hear those insights from within yourself and you build that trust up, it's like you feel safe. There's a bit more safety. There's a bit more, you know, open road, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I know, you know, thinking back to times when I do, you know, I was feeling really, really good for a while. I think we'd been working together maybe for like 2 or 3 months, and I thought, you know, it was more positive than negative. But then I think I had a period for a few weeks where I was just struggling and I was avoiding you.
Yeah, I
Because
remember.
I was like, there's no way she's not going to know that I'm crap, like, and I'm not doing the work. And You know, I'll be honest, I felt so much worse than I've ever felt at that time, you know, and I think that's part of this as well, is that, you know, previously in the past, I would have looked to something external to me to tell me, you know, like, you know, I would have covered it up. You know, I would have busied myself. You know, I had so many distractions all the time, and you know, I would have told myself. But I think once you kind of start this, you know, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to. I feel everything now so much more intensely. I think I was quite shut off from my own feelings before. You know, I ran away from them. You know, second that I felt that discomfort, I was able to shut it down, whereas now I can't. And I was feeling like grief and shame so extreme. And you know, I remember then just doing a session with you, and you know, you just turned the whole thing on its head, and you know, reframed. And you know, it's very, very difficult for me to be able to see any positives in myself when I perceive myself as not being, you know, as not showing up and doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing. If I feel, you know, exhaustion, if I'm self-sabotaging, you know, behaviors, it's very, very difficult for me not to beat myself up and be so down on myself. And, you know, I lose belief then, and I lose hope. And, you know, it's almost worse. It's definitely worse than before, because you're like, my whole mindset was, it's an absolute disgrace. You know better than this. Like, you've been working, you know, you should be changing your habits, you should be meditating, you should be walking, you should be eating healthy, you should be going to the gym, you should be, you know, showing up better, because like, you've spent a year now on this stuff. Like, I was shaming myself so much more, you know. And then, you know, really I needed somebody to say to me, it's actually okay. Like, it's okay, what you're going through is normal, and it's okay. And I was like, I was literally like a slap in the face when you said that to me. I was like, you know, you know, she's wrong. She's just being nice. But, you know, it's all part of the learning that, you know, it is okay. You are going to feel terrible. That's all part of this. And to be able to actually allow that, and to hear that voice where I'm shaming myself, and to see it, that that's actually not me, that that's something that I've learned, and to be able to kind of put some space between me and this part of me that, you know, thinks that I'm a disgrace, that I'm crap, can't see anything positive that I've done, but can really, really, really see every little negative thing in such detail. You know, it's just a gift. Like, it's a relief, because I've never been able to do that before, you know. And you know, I think the other thing for me is that, you know, I never had any belief. I still don't. I'm still early on in the process, but you know, for me, like, having belief that things can change, and that there is hope, and there is a possibility, you know. Because like, I think in one of our sessions, one of the things that you really showed me, and you showed it to me, I knew it, but I wasn't able to sort of, you know, make the connection or recognize it, was that, you know, my belief system from childhood was that life is hard, life is just shit, and especially if you're a single parent. And I had this extreme fear, because my mom, you know, she was a single parent, and she was just miserable, you know, 24/7, severely depressed. And you know, I had adopted that belief system, and I didn't believe that it would ever be different for me. And I didn't know that was how I subconsciously felt.
Yeah.
And that was a real, like, kind of light bulb moment, where I thought, you know what, I do get to choose. It might not be easy, and it might not come natural to me, but you know, there's people that have overcome more than this. And you know, I can reframe this. Yes, it's going to take commitment and dedication, but I'm not my mom, you know. And that, see, just honestly, just having the awareness that that is your core belief. You know,
Yeah.
I was so unaware of that. You know, if anything, I was screaming from the rooftops, I'm different from my mom in every way.
Yeah.
And the
That
one
was a
thing,
profound part, wasn't it? That was
Yeah.
the
Oh,
profound part, was holy fucking shit. I'm just repeating the same patterns. It's like, in the attempt to not be our parents, we turn into our parents. It's
yeah,
terrifying.
yeah.
But
It-
it was also just recognizing, I remember that session so profoundly because, you know, it was such a powerful session and you had such a shit few weeks where you were avoiding me. So it was so nice to be able to break that. But yeah, it was such a powerful session because it wasn't the fact that, you know, you were your mom, you realized that you were your mom. It was the fact that you realized that you were recreating the same patterns of, you know, whatever, feeling depressed or being a single mom. But the reality was you were actually doing the work. You were doing so much more than your mom had ever even tried to do. Yet you were still painting yourself with the same brush, with the same belief, with the same narrative, with the exact same voice that she implanted in your psyche, essentially, that yeah, life is shit, you'll never have what you want. And it was just so amazing. And I always get so much from my sessions with other people, and even for me, it was so amazing for me because I was like, holy shit, I get to choose. Like, I don't have to live the same life that my mother lived. I don't have to, you know, for me it was very much that narrative of, you know, kids are selfish and they're horrible and they're a waste, and just such a horrendous view of children. Like, it was like, you know, they're greedy and they just take from you. And it was this real visceral, horrific view of children that I internalized. And when I was with my kids, there was a part of me that wanted to love them, but that internalized voice of, you know, kids are horrible, they take from you, they're nothing, they're shit. I realized after that session, holy fucking shit, I am doing the same thing. Like, I'm here, I am totally in a different place. I am not my mother. I've done so much work. Yet that same narrative, that same voice is playing in my head as if it's reality. So yeah, it was incredible.
and yeah, no, definitely. The thing is, I think that most people don't even realize that. So I felt so privileged, and I know it sounds like a basic thing, but I felt so privileged to be able to see it so clearly. I felt that was such a massive moment for me because, um, it's that idea, you do get to choose because it's so painful. Like, I would have had the exact same beliefs about kids. My mom would have drummed that into us, that they are just leeches. And, you know, I never believed that on a conscious level, but subconsciously I did. I know that I still do, because sometimes when I'm with my kids, I just feel like it's almost physically painful,
Yeah.
that, why are they ruining my life? Like,
Mm.
because my kids, as like they're very, 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 very full on their behaviors. And, there's definitely, you know, generational trauma, and they've suffered like through this. There's no way that they couldn't have, through everything that I've been through in the marriage breakup. So they're acting out as well. So you had said to me that time, I remember, you know what, Roisin, you get to choose. So you can actually have fun with your kids and be lighthearted. It doesn't always have to be, a slog, it's like you're acting out this scene that you were taught. And, my mom used to always say, all I want to do is get them to bed. And I remember she used to put us to bed at like 6 o'clock. It was bright outside and we could hear people playing in the street. And she was like, no, no, you're going to bed. And I definitely internalized that, because there's, my system doesn't relax until my kids are out of the room,
Yeah.
or in bed. And I'm like, that's no way to live. Like, that's not why I had them, not, to just, wait for them to disappear out of my road. So yeah, it's weird, but there's definitely that thing of, I have always screamed it from the rooftops that I am not like my mom in any way. And the worst thing that anybody could have ever said to me was, you're like your mom.
And that's it. Like, you know, that's the reality for me as well, though. Like, you know, my biggest fear is that I'll be my mom. And it seemed as if by trying so hard not to be her, I was becoming her. Trying
Yeah,
so hard not to be angry, I suppressed all of my anger. And I didn't allow myself to feel any anger until it burst out into an explosion. And I recognized it's exactly what she did. You know, she wouldn't allow herself to take care of her own needs. She wouldn't allow herself to be angry, to feel anything. And then she would explode like a raging, psycho, the same way that I did, And
Yeah.
so the same thing is, it was recognizing for me. I remember thinking, one day, and I thought, I don't want to be my mom. So what did my mom need to do to be better? What do I need to do, which is what she didn't do in reality? And I really sat with that, and I was like, she never took care of her own needs. She never put herself first. She never had any passion. She never took care of herself. She had so much trauma. She never did any healing, obviously. And yeah, and so I recognize, if I don't want to be my mom, I can't keep fucking spouting this crap that I don't want to be my mom and do all the same things that she's doing, which means reject that I even have needs. And so really
Yeah.
just pausing and recognizing it's okay for me to have needs, and it's okay for me to take care of them and pause and stop. But the problem was that I internalized that narrative that having needs is selfish. All of us, so many of us did. Most of us that had any type of upbringing where there was emotional, physical, any type of neglect really, or even just parents who weren't really emotionally available. So many of us adopted those beliefs that, it is not okay for me to have needs. I have to surrender all of who I am in order to be whoever my parent needs me to be. And so I recognize that, I have only myself to blame if I don't start taking care of myself. And my husband would be like, Alwyn, what do you need? Go and take care of yourself. He would literally have to force me out the door, but I wouldn't do it. Like, I would not go and do something for myself. And he was like, what is wrong with you? And I remember getting so angry with him when he would sit and watch TV or whatever. And like you, my nervous system was so hypervigilant. I couldn't sit still for 2 seconds. And I would be like, what the fuck's he doing? What does he think this is? They were like, sitting down on his ass. He could be on the seat 5 minutes, like, and he could have been up all day. But all I focus on is the fact that he gets to sit down. And I remember I would have conversations. He's like, well, Alwyn, you can sit down too. And I'm like, no, I can't. What are you saying? Like, are you crazy? Is there something wrong with you? Like, honestly, I reckon most mother-in-laws would say, don't take care of your own needs. Like most
Oh, yeah.
mother-in-laws that I have ever encountered, it's like if the woman takes care of her own needs or puts her own needs first, it's like you
Yeah.
it's like, what? Are you insane? Get divorced, that one. Do you know?
1,000,000%. Yeah. I would have had the exact same experience. You would have, that was the worst thing you could have done. I remember with my eldest, or he's now 25. I remember when he was a baby, like I had him quite young, and my mother-in-law passed away about 10 years ago. But with my, I was a young mummy and I hadn't a clue, and my mom wasn't present at all. So I didn't have anybody to look to. As my mom was really, really ill at the time. And I remember my mother-in-law, who was a lovely person, like well-meaning, but I learned very early on in my experience as being a mother that, Roisin, you come last every single time. And that would have been her attitude to parenthood as well. Not the men. Like the men can watch the football and do whatever they want, and they get their dinner. You don't eat until, like everything else is done. It's definitely like bred into us. I would actually get triggered, by people who, this is how I know that it's so ingrained in me, because people who, say for example in work, because a big part of my job is training. So we would be imparting information, I suppose, on the law to like senior managers and senior professionals. And from the outside, I suppose, looking in, it's quite a you are in a position of responsibility, and you're taking on something that other people would probably find quite challenging. But I could never and can never feel any sense of, I it actually really grinds on me, these people who take this kind of sense of superiority, almost, I would say it like that, like they think they're something special because they're standing up there, because there are people in my work, would have a very different approach to me, probably healthier, where they actually know, what, I'm doing a good job here, and I am in a strong position where I can share this information. I'm confident enough to do it. People can ask me questions. That would really grate on me, to the point that I know, like, when something's triggering you like that, there's something not quite right there. I would be very, very down on myself, very much like, yeah, okay, so I might have done that presentation well, but that doesn't mean nothing. I can't take anything from that. Like, otherwise, to do that would be, I would be a big-headed, not very nice person.
Too big for your boots.
Yeah, and I've definitely taken on that thing. I look at them, the people that I'm teaching, as they know so much more than me, like, and they don't. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, I definitely, I really, really feel that, both at work and at home. Even now, like I've said to you, I struggle with my teenage kids. I struggle with asking them to do anything, because I perceive that I should be the one that does all the skivvying, that, and this is something that I never linked back to my upbringing either. My mum used to say to me, Roisin, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to run yourself into the ground. Like, why can't you ask them? And, even working with coaches before I even met you, like, would have said to me, right, the job I want to give you for this week, Roisin, is to get the kids to do this each day. And I'm telling you now, I couldn't do it, because there's just this part of me that's like, they're more important than me. They matter more than me. And, I should be the one that, they didn't ask to have a younger sibling. Like, my youngest is 6. So he takes a lot of my time and energy, and I work full time as well. So, there's not very much left at the end of the day. Plus, I never sleep very well. So I'm always tired. So there's always a big part of me that's like, oh, if only my daughter would do X for me in the evening, and if only my son would do that, like 40 minutes, half an hour chore, whatever. But because I feel so much, that, everybody else's time is more important than mine, everybody else's, I want them to, come in at the end of the day. And there's definitely a huge cultural thing now as well. Like, when I look at other parents and other families and talk to other people, they're all, their kids are not asked to do very much. So then there's this whole part of me that's like, I don't want my kids to be different just because I'm a single parent. Why should they have to suffer? So yeah, it's a huge thing with me. It's something that, I do find very challenging to
And I
overcome.
think, do you know what I find with it as well, which is really interesting, is, I remember the podcast or the episode I did with Isabel, and she was talking about the, looking for the validation from our children. She was like, I don't need to have validation from my kids, And I remember it really struck me, because I recognized how much my worth came from the validation from my children, how happy or unhappy they were. And I think, one of the things I recognize is, when you have teenage children, and if you don't feel like you are worthy of existing, when you don't feel like you are worthy of love, and of acceptance, it's so often we would prefer to not ask them to do something, because of the possibility of them saying no and us feeling completely rejected and worthless. And so it's easier for us to do everything ourselves and, act as if, oh, well, this is just it. It's fine for me to do it. They're busy, rather than acknowledge the fact that, we fear their emotions. We fear that they're going to have some type of reaction that is, going to make us feel exactly what we feel in the first place, trigger that point in us that feels worthless and shit and nothing. And the only reason I say it is because I definitely find it myself with my boys. My boys are only young, they're only 3 and 5, but I recognize that when they do something, or if I ask them to do something and it's something that I know that they can do, or if they've done something and messed something up, and if I ask them to do something, if I'm holding boundaries and trying to ask them to do something, I find that the amount of worthlessness that I feel, the amount of pain and sorrow and grief that I feel in my body when they say no, I take it not as a child saying, oh, I don't want to do it, I'm lazy. I take it as a, you're shit, you're nothing, I don't have to do anything for you, you're crap. And so when I
Yeah.
perceive it from that lens, I then get angry, because my defense, my reactivity then is, well, I'm just going to get angry then because I feel really hurt. I feel really rejected. It is hitting on the wound of shame and pain within me. And then I get angry with them. So I stopped asking them to do something. Like my husband was like, Alwyn, you don't get them to do anything. They have no responsibility. They don't take care of anything. They don't do anything. And I recognize that I did that all in a way and in an attempt to stop this cycle of them not doing what I asked, me feeling so worthless, so rejected. They don't give a fuck about me. That's the voice inside my head. When I stopped to listen to it, I was like, holy shit, you are nasty. It was like, they don't give a shit about you. You're nothing. You're no one. They're laughing in your face. No one loves you. No one wants you. And then I'd get angry because of that voice. But in reality, if I was to look at this from a different lens, I'd say, hey, darling, can you pick that up, please? And they'd say, no, I'm not going to do that, or I don't want to do that. If I'm looking at it through the lens of, I'm good enough as I am worthy, I don't need them to validate me in order to be loved, I'd say, okay, sweetheart, but I'm not going to do it. And so we're not going to be able to go anywhere until we clean this up. So it's your choice. You can do it now or you can do it later, but I'm not going to be cleaning it up, and we're not going anywhere, leaving the house until we do it. Okay. So I'm just going to go do something else, because
Yeah.
I'm not tied into their needing and their love. I know, Roisin, I know I had kids in order to fill the void that I'm not lovable. I know that's the only reason I had kids. I felt so worthless my whole entire life. I hated myself so much my whole entire life that I believed that I was sold this narrative. Kids love their parents no matter what. Kids
Yeah.
love their parents and they dote on them. And I was painted this beautiful picture, and I'll be the perfect parent, and I'll finally feel loved. And then I
Yeah.
had kids in order to fulfill this need, this hole, this well that was within me. And they did the opposite. They cried. When I wanted sleep, they would cry. And I took it as a personal insult that they don't love
Yeah.
me. Everything came back to the fact that I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, and they're never going to love me. And it's such a painful place to be in. And so with you, you're never going to be able to bridge that gap and have the kids show up and take responsibility until you yourself are able to meet the resistance, meet the voice within you that comes up and arcs up like a fucking demon, because these voices, they're so convincing, especially when
Yeah.
we've not challenged them.
Oh, 100%. Like I feel it physically. I feel physically winded. I would have this especially with my 14-year-old son. He's extremely challenging. And I've had that, well, it happens regularly, but I will ask him to do something and he'll say no. And I will feel that, like almost physically, I can feel it in my body. But I know as well, like as you were talking there, I looking back now, I can see that a big part of the reason why I stayed in my marriage for as long as I did was because I was able to protect my kids so much more from, me when I was with Paul, because Paul and I, we had, loads and loads of difficulties and problems, but we ran the house so well together to the point that I was able to give my kids this beautiful life. I was able to, I didn't, there was two incomes coming in, so we had a lot more money. There was two, Paul was very, very hands-on, like extremely, for, to the point that, he was probably more hands-on than me because I had a more challenging career. So he would have taken on more responsibility, and my kids had a blessed life. And looking back now, like I took so much pride from that, like you said, it was, I'm changing, I'm having these kids and these kids love me. And they did. They don't love this version of me. They don't like it, because since I've been healing and since I've been coming to terms with this, this last year, you know, allowing these emotions and allowing the pain, it spills out. Like, you can't, and that's one of the reasons why I was so resistant, because I knew that was going to happen. Like, you know, I knew that you know, I said to you from the start, I can't cry in front of my kids. I will not subject them to that. And I think it was because I was subjected to that so much from my mum, that I did not want them to see me broken, because I know what it did to me. But, you know, in saying that, my mum didn't deal with it the way that I do, you know, that I'm trying to anyway. But, you know, I did not want my kids to see me struggle, you know, in any way. Like, and I think that's part of it now, you know, is that I feel so much shame that, how dare I put this onto them, you know, like, I'm lucky that I can have open conversations with my daughter, and she's kind of aware of, you know, the fact that I am, like, I'll tell her some things, you know, I don't want to put very much on it because she's only 16, but I will tell her that, I have a lot of pain sometimes, and it spills out, and I'm working on it, and it will be okay. Like, I promise you it'll be okay. And I can have open conversations with her whenever she does, because she does really, really trigger me at times. But my son, who's 14, he's completely different, you know, and we've talked about him before. Like, he he's just looking at me pleadingly, like, begging me to be this person that he needs me to be, which is, you know, calm, cool, collected together. And he just desperately needs me to be strong. So I just feel that as like an extra layer almost on top, like, you know, it's all well and good for these other people that are healing. They're not doing it in the spotlight of a teenager who will criticize you, even if you are, like, you know, you've got your like shit together. They will still rip you apart. You know, that's what teenagers do. But if you're like me, you know, there's a chance that the relationship will be ruptured, and I suppose that's my fear. You know, I don't want him to look back and say, you know, Mum, you were not there for me when I was 14. You were too busy, you know. So that's been a big part of it as well, is coming to terms with that for me. You know, it's easier with younger kids because you can give them a cuddle. You can say, you know, I was crying the other night, just processing whatever it was, I can't remember. And I thought my 6-year-old was asleep, but he wasn't. Because I always lie on the bed beside him till he falls asleep, just since the separation and things like that. But he sat up in the bed, and he literally came over to me, and he put his hand on my face, and he was like, Mummy. And I was like, oh geez, like, what am I doing? I thought he was asleep, and I just automatically said, you know what, darling, Mummy's just sad, but everybody's sad, darling. Like, you cry sometimes. I'm just having a wee cry here. And he was like, oh yeah, Mummy, that's okay. I do cry. And he gave me a cuddle, and he lay down and went back to sleep. And I was like, that's the difference between wee ones and teenagers, you know, because teenagers have got their own hormones on board, and they're finding their wee way. And I never wanted to put any of this on them. As I said, like, that's why I think I was so resistant to doing the work. I was so resistant to leaving Paul, because in my mind, I could package it all up much more nicely for them if I was still in that relationship, and if I hadn't lifted the lid on all my own stuff. But I just have to have that sense of belief that this work will benefit them one day, you know, ultimately.
And the thing is like, you know, I can't say, I don't know the future. I can't tell the future, but I firmly believe it so deeply that your children will be so much better off, even if you spend this year crying, even if you spend next year crying. It's not the falling apart. It's not really even about the healing. It's about the fact that you are taking responsibility for your own life, Roisin. You know,
Yeah.
that is massive, whether they're young or they're old, and whether they're aware of it or they're not aware of it, whether they're conscious to it or not conscious to it. You know, so many people, you know, they stay in marriages because they're like, I don't want to rupture the family. I don't want to create that for my children. I don't want to hurt my children, or I don't want to heal because I don't want them to see me fall apart. But the reality is kids see it, feel it all. You know,
Yeah.
whether you think that you've got them all fooled, it's all bullshit. None of us
Yeah.
have them fooled. They are absolute antennas into who we are, what we are, and they will just replicate it completely.
Yeah.
And so they are essentially replicating the generational trauma, even if you weren't presenting with it. But what you're doing is you're essentially breaking that cord. You are breaking the cord to your generational trauma. And come here, there's no doubt that I'm sure that they'll probably have something to work on. Who's not going to have anything to work on? But I believe that when a person takes responsibility for their own life, for their own healing, even if it takes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I think that's more profound and more powerful for a child to experience and see than anything, because it's the problem is not that you saw your mom struggle. The problem was that she never took any responsibility for that struggle. She never even communicated that she had feelings, that she was experiencing anything to you. She left you out in the dark. She locked you out of her life. She locked you out of her consciousness. You didn't barely even exist to her. And you're not doing that. Yes, of course, you have the struggle. It's not easy on you, and it's not easy on the kids, obviously, because no one wants to see their mom fall apart. But at the same time, you know, this is a journey. And as you keep stepping forward, you are healing, you're mending. Some of those scars start to wound to come together. And I know it myself, like, I obviously mine are smaller, but I know it myself from, the experience that my boys have had with me. They're just they are so much better off, even though they had such a traumatic experience and a traumatic time with me, and it's been really hard. I still prefer that version of me to the dead version that they had beforehand. And
Yeah.
that's ultimately, my strongest message is that, we think that we're protecting our kids by keeping the lid on things, or by staying in marriages that don't make us happy, or staying in jobs that don't make us happy, or just, being there for the kids. So many mothers that self-sacrificing, oh, but I put my kids first. All we're teaching our children is the same generational wounding and patterns that, they don't put themselves first. So yes, definitely. I'm sure that, you know, your teenagers, they'll have their own path and their own stuff to do. But you know what I fucking know as well? They'll have one incredible mom to guide their way, to be there as a loving presence. And I think, Roisin, I think anything's possible when you have someone that loves you, when that someone has actually turned the focus inwards and took responsibility for their own healing. I think that is just profound. And I know, and I think you could probably agree with me, with our own parents, they took no responsibility for anything that they inflicted upon us. But if they just chose to actually turn inwards and say, holy shit, I'm so sorry that I made you suffer like that. I'm so sorry that that was all on me. None of that was your fault. Everything that I said to you, I was saying to myself.
Yeah.
Even after the fact, 40 years later, that
Mm-hmm.
would be profoundly healing for us.
Yeah.
So the fact that you are doing it when your kids are so young, even teenagers, the fact that you're so open and honest and you're showing your vulnerabilities. And yes, you're not perfect. And yes, you're definitely not at the fucking end, wherever the end is. But I believe showing up is way more powerful for our children to see and to build that resilience. I think that they build so much resilience in walking along this journey with us, even if they're not fully consciously aware of it. I believe that they take it in by osmosis nearly, just by being with us. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do, and I hold on to that, and I think the good thing, the gift about this whole process for me has been that there's just been these light bulb moments where, it's almost like I am being guided to see, every so often, like I do get lost in it, and there's times when you're in the middle of it, and when you're going through the daily grind and you're feeling all these feelings of guilt and shame, it's very, very hard to hold on to that. But then all of a sudden something will happen out of the blue, and it'll be like, hit me up the face. Like, my daughter made a comment to me there a few weeks ago, we were just chatting, and you know, she turned around and said something to me like, oh, it was awful, you know, the atmosphere was terrible when Dad was here. And I was like, what? Because I genuinely thought we had it all. So like, we had this whole big like act going on, and we never argued really. All the fighting happened way before those two, you know, Emer and Daniel were born. It was my eldest that really bore the brunt of it whenever we, you know, all the gambling came to light initially. But we had learned to live alongside each other with minimal conflict, I thought. But she essentially told me like this wasn't a pleasant environment, you know, and it really shocked me. But she, you know, she was communicating in her own way, you know, yeah, Mum, I know, like, I know it's awful now, but it's better than it was before, you know. And just, there's been so many times that I can't even think of an example, but where I have just had this deep knowing this, you know, you're doing the best thing here, you're doing the best thing. Yes, it's hard. Like there's days where I'm like, you know, this is too much. I just want to run away. I just actually want to run away. But then, you know, you seem to go through those tunnels and then, you know, something amazing just happens out of the blue. And you're like, I know that happened because I did that work. If I hadn't done that work, I wouldn't have been able to do that, which led to that. You know, it's only when you're looking back sometimes that you can see how you're changing, because you don't, you know, I think at the beginning I thought like when I my whole romantic idea was like, I'll do this 4-week program and the next thing you know, I'll be like the, you know, whole shiny new person. It doesn't work like that. It's very much like stuff that you don't even notice at the time, but you realize, you know what, I am showing up differently. You know, I would never have done that a year ago the way I did it now. But there's also those really, really horrible, icky moments where, you know, I think when you're starting to like tune in to your own feelings a lot more, that's a lot of the work that I've been doing with you is, you know, trying to be able to identify what it is that I feel in a particular moment or what it is that I need. And when this is something that you've never practiced your whole life, it can overwhelm you and you can become very you know, just completely overwhelmed and struggle, and being able to accept that is hard. I want to do it in secret. I don't want to do it in my home around my kids, but the reality is I don't have a choice. So all I can do is just try to repair and just keep going, just keep moving forward, because ultimately I do believe that I will be in a different place, you know, in 5 years time. And
You'll be alongside me, we'll be doing retreats and everything.
bring it on.
So, you know, I want to, you know, you're always so good. You know, I really love that you're always able to ground this work in a way that I can't, because I've been doing this for quite a bit of time. And so I really love that you bring that to the table. And so, you know, if there's, yeah, for people who, whether they haven't started the work or they don't even know what the fuck to do, they're just lost, they know that they're not happy, you know, what would you say? Like, what advice would you have? What would you say to people who are just knowing that this isn't what they want, or they're just unhappy, or they just know something's not right, but they don't know what to do next? What would you recommend?
I suppose the main thing I have to say, you know, is go with your gut. I think, you know, I try to ignore my gut because we're all sold this kind of, you know, sexy like version of healing. It's definitely a thing online where it's like, you don't have to do the work. You know, you really, really don't have to do it. You can cut corners, you can take shortcuts, and that's so appealing now because we all live in this like, you know, fast paced, you know, we're all working, we don't have the luxury of going off and, you know, I did not want, if you'd have told me a year ago, if you'd have spoke to me this time last year and said, yeah, you'll be sitting here next year, your finances won't be any better, because that was a big kind of motivating factor for me, was I believed that, you know, my wounding, the way that it affected me was that I didn't believe I was worthy of being in a strong, being able to have money, being able to keep money, being able to, believe that I was worthy of that. So I thought, right, if I do this healing for a couple of months, then things will start to look better for me in my reality. That's what I believe. But I also kind of knew that it was too good to be true. And I think that's the main thing I would say, like, go with your gut, because the stuff that, you posted, as much as, I was resisting it, it hit me so deeply, that I knew that was what I needed to do. There was no question in my mind. I just didn't want to do it. So yeah, I think, what's right for one person isn't right for everybody. There's all different kind of things out there, and I'm trying different things alongside the work that I'm doing with you. There's so many amazing resources. So, when I started, I literally trawled your page, and there was so much information there on parts work and inner child healing meditations, and I was kind of just doing a wee bit of trial and error, and figuring out what worked for me. So that, to me, it's like, you will know when something resonates with you. You'll feel it deep inside, and I always did. And for me, I think there was a link with you with the kids and how I felt, in parenthood. So, one coach would be right for one person and another coach would be right for someone else. So find the person that you really resonate with. But for me as well, it was your personality as well. I think we're quite similar. And I always felt that I could trust you. I always felt that, you didn't bullshit me ever. And you need that as well. But for me, the other thing I would say is, I resisted. I didn't want to work with anybody at all. I really, really did not. I think it was maybe 8 months into being part of your group that I, eventually reached out to you and suggested working together, because I did not want anybody to look at me and see how kind of broken I am, and how, I always put on a brave face, and nobody else could see that. I think if most people in my life knew, that they just don't know any of this stuff really. So but working one-to-one with somebody personally, I think, is a must. I don't think you can do this on your own, not in the initial stages anyway. I couldn't have. I had read every single self-help book on this stuff, and I had started all these programs. And I think whenever you are kind of in that place where you don't have any self-belief, you don't have any, you shame yourself, I would have always found a way to shame myself and say, there's another program you've just started and you're crap, so you've stopped it again after 2 weeks because you're just not thing. And that was a pattern that kept repeating itself for years before I got to this point. So you literally need somebody who's going to grab you by the throat and say, no, you're not, you're not crap, you're not all this. I definitely think that those were the two main things for me. It was following my gut instinct as to what, who I needed to work with, and just keeping on checking in on a regular basis as well, with the group and with the posts. And, because I learn everything, it's drip, 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 over time. But there's so many synchronicities as well. I find you post things at the exact moment that I'm feeling that, and I'm like, there's no way that this can be right. So, it's just, finding that individual or that group or that person that, really gets you and that you can relate to. And yeah, initially working with somebody one-to-one and then going from there would be my key things. But go with your gut. And through time, I have developed an ability to know what it is that I need as well. And also to forgive yourself, as when you do check out, because I do check out quite regularly. But I think that's part of it too. You need to, for your own sanity, otherwise you would just burn yourself out.
And that's it. I think so many of my clients, they have that shame, and that, it's oh, I've just not been doing anything, I haven't been doing the work, or I've been eating shit food constantly. And I'm like, of course you have. this work is fucking hard. You can't do this all the time. You can't be showing up like this all the time. Like this work, like I was saying to someone before, it's the equivalent of running 5 marathons every day. You know, the amount that the energy that this work takes to show up, it's beyond anything anyone could actually understand. It really is, until you do it. So it is just it I think if nothing else, what I want to bring forward always is that no matter what it is that you're doing, one, like you said, trying to follow your gut. And if you have no idea what your gut is, or you can't hear it, that's totally fine. Follow the breadcrumbs. Just like you said, those synchronicities. You know, if you see that podcast episode and you're like, oh, something about that, I don't know why, I'm just going to listen to it, then listen to it. And if you have a drive to contact someone, the voice in your head will say, don't do it, but do it, you know, like that's, you know, you were so brave to get in contact with me. You were extremely brave. And, you know, you were just kind of like, you know, I don't know if it's going to work out, whatever. And I was like, no, perfect. Let's start work now. Because my intuitive guides were like, once I got your message, I was like, yeah, we're starting work. I don't really give a shit what way we're going to make it work. We'll make it work. Because I knew it. Like I had so connected to my own inner wisdom by that point that I knew when people were sent to me, you know, for whatever reason. And so I didn't give a shit about how we were going to make it happen. I just knew that we were going to make it happen, because the bravery that it took for you to reach out. Obviously, I've been taking on one-on-one clients, but you know, I think following those breadcrumbs, you know, like if you keep on seeing that same, you know, book being recommended, or, you know, a psychiatrist or whatever, a psychologist or whoever that may be, or a group, even a group that's out there in person, or a group that's online, or sharing in a group, all of these things that put you outside your comfort zone, that put you more in the mix of healing, is always going to bring you closer to where you want to go. And secondly, really releasing the shame, which is so obviously, you know how massive that is for me. You know, the shame around whether you're meditating or not meditating, whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. There's no right, there's no wrong. You know, it's very much about following what you need to do in each and every moment. If you feel the call to contact someone, contact them. If they don't get back to you, that's fine. Maybe they'll get back to you in 2 months' time, and that's exactly when you're meant to work with them, not right now. But just really trying to ask for help, saying, okay, I recognize I'm not where I want to be. I want to be happier. I want my life to be different. You know, if there's someone up there, if there's a universe or a God or a spirit, or if there's even just a part of me, please help me find the way. Just, I'm open to it. And I promise that when you open up to it, things happen, things start
Yeah,
shifting, things
yeah,
start
yeah,
changing. And
yeah,
I've noticed so much with you, like, you know, the more that you've opened up that connection, you know, the more synchronicities that happen and fall upon your lap. And these things, you can't make these things up. Like the same with the
yeah,
posts, you know, like connect in with these things, and don't shame yourself for not being where someone else is, or not doing what someone else is doing. You know,
yeah,
everyone's journey is so unique. And it doesn't necessarily mean the more you do, the more healed you are, because sometimes the more you do, it's the more that you're trying to fix yourself. Whereas you could do
yeah,
one thing, you could do one practice, and if you do that practice well, that could bring you way further than the person who's doing a bit of everything, you know? And
yeah,
so there's no point in shaming yourself.
yeah. No, I think since I've kind of got better at that, one of the things I've noticed is that um, I will naturally, I've naturally changed my reactions. I haven't tried to force it. You know, whenever I get, you know, whenever something really triggers me, whenever I'm really fearful, now I'm naturally saying, you know what, Roisin, it's going to be okay. I trust that this is going to work out. And, you know, not automatically going into that kind of, you know, that, because I have developed so much belief over the last 12 months. You know, there's situations that I thought I wouldn't get through this year. you know, emotionally, financially. You know, I thought I would break, you know, and I haven't. And that's one of the things that I would definitely say, like, you know, overall be positive, because it's actually a gift. See, despite everything else, see, being given the opportunity to get to know yourself. If you've had the kind of childhood that many people have, you know, for whatever reason, you know, to be able to get this opportunity to, you know, reparent yourself or whatever it is, and, you know, allow yourself to feel that compassion for yourself and forgiveness. You know, I perceived myself so negatively before this. You know, if I didn't do things, you know, I always beat myself up. But now I have so much more compassion for myself that I can see, I know why I am like that, because I've done all this work. So like, if I was starting again, I would approach this as a gift in a more positive way. And I would also know, you know what, see, no matter how painful it is, it's worth it. You know,
Yeah.
I would welcome that pain and that grief, because you have to let that out. Like, I've let so much of it out. There's still a lot there, and I know, like, you know, some days are just a slog, and I feel like I'm climbing a mountain some days, and carrying all this. But then there's other days where I feel lighter, and I know that it's because, you know, I did allow a lot of that, you know, that crap out of my system. I let some of it out, you know, you know, and it's still a lot of it there, but you know, it will take time. But overall, I'm just so grateful for this, because I am a different person than I was a year ago. You know, other people might not see it. If you looked at my house and looked, you know, I thought it was all going to be external, like, you know, I'm going to get this brilliant new job, and it doesn't work like that. But I feel myself that I'm so privileged, you know, to have been able to learn from you and learn from everybody else in the group.
And I think that's one of the funniest things, is that, you know, so often we think that these things are going to fix the external, you know, like, you know, my even physical appearance, like that was such a big thing for me. I really wanted to physically look different, you know, and, and, you know, with regards house or a car, I've never been that materialistic. But there's so many of these things that we wish to change in order to make what's inside of us feel better. And we think that that's rich, that's gold. But when you do this work and you can connect to yourself in that way, there is no greater gift. There is no gold richer than that feeling of nearly coming home to yourself, you know, coming
Yeah.
home to, you know, it's like, what's the point in having a beautiful house if this house, your own self, is just filled with hatred and sadness and pain? It doesn't fix anything. And, you know, I think even for my husband, like, you know, obviously he's been on this journey now with me for quite a bit of the time. And I just see it in him. You know, he's just shifted so much dramatically about how he physically looks and what he needs in order, with regards what our house looks like or a car. He's like, nothing matters. You know, nothing outside of us matters. Because if you don't have that self compassion, that ability to have love for yourself, and that's a path and it's a journey. It takes a long time to have that self love, that self acceptance. But as you get the trickle of those moments where you do feel, it's like a sigh of relief that, you know, some of that pain has left you, that's when you realize what real wealth is. That's what you realize, what real power, what real beauty is. And you could look at the people with these mansions and with these perfect lives and smile at them and go, no one's as rich as I am. And that's honestly how I feel. Like,
Yeah.
I believe that I am way more wealthier than most people on this planet, because I don't fear what lives within me. Yeah, I still do a bit. I'm still on the journey, but that ability to be with myself, to feel at home within myself, is just profound. And the ability to receive love, because, you know, my boys, I was never able to love them. I was never able to feel love but from them, in the way
Yeah.
that I do now. And one of my little boys gave me a hug the last day, and it just really just caught me again, this fact that for so long I couldn't feel that, and to be able to feel that and feel their arms, feel the presence of their little arms around me, not thinking about everything else I needed to do or feeling so afraid of the anxiety within me. I was able to just be present and just love them in that moment. And I was like, fuck, we're getting this all wrong.
Yeah.
This is the goal. This is success. All the rest
Yeah.
is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't accept love from anybody if you have this wall up, which
Yeah.
and it is chipping away at that. And being free, like I said this to you before, like I used to look at the title of your group and say, like, what is she talking about, being free? Like, I don't know what that means. Like, I'm definitely free. Like, I don't know what she's on about, but I understand that deeply now. It's like, I need to be free because I put so many constraints on myself, and it's letting go of those, being able to just relax. Like, that sounds so basic, but see, when you can't do that and you've never been able to do that, like, that's painful. It is actually physically painful when you can never relax. Just there's no point in anything else because you're not going to get any joy. There's times in my life I've got good jobs, good things have happened, but you take this with you wherever you go. It doesn't matter if you're in flipping, Portugal on holidays, you still take this pain with you wherever you go. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. And what's the point? Like, there's no freedom if you are locked in a cage no matter where you go.
Yeah.
It's like you just bring your chains with you. You bring your manacles and you're just chained to the next place. I remember the same thing, going on holidays and just dragging all of this pain and sorrow and sadness with me. And, I'm very, it's funny now, like, I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go on any holiday until I know that I'm in a space where I can actually open up, enjoy it, and feel free. And I definitely have experienced a lot more of that now, with going away with my friend, going out with my husband. And I was like, holy shit, like, this is what it feels like to be free, just looking up at the trees and feeling the sun. And it's like I've been in these moments so many times in my life, but I haven't been present to them because I've been so locked in whatever trauma I was living. And
Yeah.
I honestly just stood in that moment going, if I only got to experience this one moment, it would all be worth it because it was that beautiful. What's the
Yeah.
point in getting to your deathbed and having survived, but never having actually having any moments of presence and joy and happiness,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So thank you so much, Roisin. Like, as always, it's so amazing to chat, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more. We're going to be doing some questions and answers, we're hoping to do, aren't we? That's one of the plans. So we're going to be looking at the group, getting people to maybe throw in some questions. And me and you are going to go through those together. And yeah, just different things. I think we'll play around with it, but you can be my little sidekick for for some of the
Yeah.
podcasts, pull you into them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for recording this with me today. You're so busy, you've got lots on, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, listen, it's my pleasure. I'm just delighted and grateful for the opportunity, like I said to you before. And yeah, looking forward to doing the questions and answers because I know personally that's where I get so much value.
Okay. Love you lots.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. All the links to the information we discussed in this episode will be in the show notes, including timestamps where we change topics, so if you want to come back later and just listen to one section, you can. If you haven't done so already, please join our Facebook group, Let Me Be Free, The Wounded Inner Child, and post either anonymously or not what's going on for you in your world. We'd also be delighted if you would share this podcast or the Facebook group with one person who you think would benefit from the information. Be along, Mahaguf. Have a beautiful day.